The night sky above the human frontier colonies was torn apart by fire. What had been peaceful towns, filled with the sounds of laughter, markets, and children playing, became scenes of chaos as alien fleets descended without warning. Their ships cut through the clouds like blades, their bomb bays opening to release death upon the helpless ground below. Explosions shattered the silence, turning entire districts into rubble. Homes burned, streets split open, and the once bright fields of crops became seas of ash. The people screamed as the first wave of destruction fell, families rushing into broken shelters, clutching their children as if their arms could shield them from the storm raining down from the sky. The aliens watched from their command ships with cruel satisfaction. To them, it was not a battle. It was punishment. Humanity had grown bold in the galaxy, daring to expand into frontier space, daring to claim territory they were told was not theirs. The Council wanted an example made, and these colonies were chosen. The admirals of the alien fleet believed the bombing would break humanity's spirit, that Earth would see the fire and fall silent, humbled forever. To them, the humans were fragile creatures, emotional and reckless, too weak to endure such a loss. But the truth was different on the ground. Amidst the rubble, as families cried and flames consumed everything they loved, there was no surrender in their eyes. There was fear, yes, and sorrow, but beneath it burned something deeper, a fury that only grew with every passing second. Survivors stumbled from the ruins, their clothes torn, their faces marked with ash, yet their voices carried more than despair. They carried vows. They swore that the galaxy would remember this day, not as the day humanity broke, but as the day it was reborn in fire. From orbit, the alien commanders mocked their victims. "This will be enough," one said coldly, watching the colonies burn. "They will not recover. They will crawl back into their small worlds and stay silent." Another laughed, convinced the message was clear, challenged the Council and faced destruction. They did not see what was happening beneath the surface of the planet, in hidden bunkers where signals were already being sent back to Earth. They did not hear the voices of human leaders, calm but sharp, whispering through encrypted channels. "They have struck us. Now they will learn what it means to awaken the dragons." On the frontier world of Arion, one of the largest human colonies, the destruction was almost total. Skyscrapers that had touched the clouds now lay in broken heaps. The capital plaza, once a place of festivals and gatherings, burned under the wreckage of alien bombs. Yet within the ruins, groups of survivors gathered. Doctors worked by the light of burning buildings, stitching wounds with trembling hands. Soldiers, few and outnumbered, carried rifles and guided people into underground tunnels. Even children helped, carrying water, dragging the injured, refusing to be paralyzed by fear. The humans were not broken. They were enduring. And their endurance, stronger than the aliens had ever imagined, was becoming something else: rage. The first images of the devastation spread across the galaxy within hours. Alien media channels proudly broadcasted the lesson given to humanity, showing burning colonies and homeless survivors as proof of the Council's power. But what the aliens saw as weakness, others saw differently. On worlds far from the frontier, whispers began. Some species, long oppressed under the Council's rule, saw humanity's suffering and recognized themselves. They saw not weakness, but a mirror of their own chains. They whispered that perhaps humanity would not bow. Perhaps this fire would only forge them stronger. On Earth, when the reports arrived, silence filled the war chambers. Leaders, generals, and scientists watched the recordings of the flames, the cries of the wounded, the laughter of the alien broadcasters. Their hands clenched, their jaws tightened, but no one spoke of surrender. They had known the Council would one day strike, but even they had not expected such cruelty. Now there was no doubt, no hesitation. Earth's silence was broken, and from its depths something ancient stirred. The time had come to awaken what they had hidden for generations: the dragons. These dragons were not myths, though the galaxy would soon think they were. They were humanity's most guarded secret, colossal warships and weapons designed in silence, kept asleep beneath oceans and mountains, waiting for the day humanity could no longer endure chains. That day had come, written in fire across the frontier colonies. The alien fleets, still circling the skies, believed they had won. They thought they had silenced humanity with their bombs. But in truth, they had only lit the spark of vengeance. As the last bombs fell and the alien ships turned back to their bases, the colonies smoldered like wounded beasts. Smoke rose into the sky, black against the stars. Survivors buried their dead with shaking hands, their eyes glowing not with defeat but with promise. "They will pay," one whispered over the graves. "They will all pay." And those words spread like a storm, carried through messages, carried through blood. The aliens had believed destruction would break humanity's will. They had not understood that humanity had always been born from fire, had always grown stronger in the face of loss. Every ruined home, every life taken, every field burned was fuel for something greater. The hunt had not yet begun, but the fire had. And soon, the galaxy would learn that the bombs had not broken humanity. They had awakened its dragons. Ash still clung to the air of the shattered colonies, carried on the winds that swept through streets reduced to rubble. Fires smoldered where entire neighborhoods had once stood, and the cries of the survivors mixed with the low rumble of collapsing buildings. For the alien fleets that had unleashed this destruction, it was proof of victory. To them, the sight of human worlds burning was enough to declare their mission successful. They left orbit in pride, convinced the lesson had been delivered. But in the silence left behind, something far more dangerous than despair began to take root. Humanity did not bow its head. Humanity sharpened its teeth. On the colony of Arion, a once thriving hub of frontier trade, the survivors gathered in underground bunkers, their faces lit only by flickering emergency lamps. Families huddled together, whispering not of fear, but of promises. Mothers pressed their children close, telling them to remember what had happened. Fathers swore that their blood would not be spilled in vain. Soldiers stood at the entrances, watching the smoke outside, their hands trembling not with weakness but with rage. Humanity had endured catastrophes before, but this time was different. This time, they would not endure quietly. This time, they would answer. Transmissions moved across the stars, encrypted and hidden from alien eyes. Grainy footage of burning cities, crying children, and mass graves raced toward Earth. Within hours, every corner of the homeworld knew the truth. The Council had not merely struck the colonies. It had tried to break the very spirit of humanity. And in trying, it had awakened something long kept in shadows. Leaders met in hidden chambers beneath Earth's capital. Their faces were grim, their voices calm, but their eyes carried the same fire that burned in the hearts of the survivors. This was not the first time humanity had been mocked, threatened, or attacked. But now, the time for warnings was over. "The Council believes we are broken," one general said, his voice steady as the chamber filled with silence. "They believe this bombing will frighten us into silence. They are wrong. They have not broken us. They have lit the fire that will destroy them." Around him, the others nodded, their expressions carved with resolve. Then came the words that no alien was meant to hear, the words that had been buried for generations. The dragons must be awakened. The dragons. A name spoken in whispers, a legend dismissed even by most humans as myth. But the truth was far more terrifying. Beneath oceans, deep inside mountains, and hidden in orbiting stations cloaked from every sensor, humanity had prepared weapons for its darkest day. They were not ordinary warships. They were titans of steel and fire, engines of destruction designed when humanity first realized the galaxy could never be trusted. For decades they had slept, their cores dormant, their cannons silent, their existence known only to a few. The Council had mocked humans as fragile and reckless, never realizing that in their silence humanity had built monsters. On the surface of Arion, survivors gathered near the wreckage of what had once been their capital. They buried their dead in silence, but every grave was a vow. Children who had lost parents stood with fists clenched, their tears burning into anger. Farmers who had lost fields picked up rifles dropped by fallen soldiers. Even the wounded, lying in makeshift hospitals, whispered the same promise. This was not the end. The bombing had not destroyed humanity's spirit, it had united it. News spread across other colonies. each with its own story of fire and ash. And with every report, the message grew louder: we will not forgive. We will not forget. The alien broadcasts that showed human suffering as weakness backfired, for every image only fanned the flames of vengeance. Entire populations rallied behind Earth, sending their remaining ships, their workers, their soldiers to join what was coming. The galaxy thought humanity's silence meant fear. They did not see that silence had become the sound of rage waiting to be unleashed. In the hidden hangars of Earth, the awakening began. Massive doors opened for the first time in centuries, releasing clouds of dust and steam. Engineers in armored suits walked through caverns the size of cities, their eyes wide as the Titans stirred. The dragons came alive one by one, their hulls glimmering black under the floodlights, their weapons humming as ancient cores flickered awake. Their engines, buried deep, roared like beasts shaking off their chains. Soldiers stood on catwalks above them, silent as they watched the sleeping giants breathe for the first time in generations. Humanity's vengeance now had wings. The first fleet of dragons rose into Earth's orbit, their shadows falling across the planet's surface. Civilians gathered in the streets, looking up in awe and fear. The sky was filled with warships unlike anything they had ever seen, each one larger and more powerful than entire enemy squadrons. People cheered, not because they wanted war, but because they finally knew they were no longer prey. Humanity had claws, and those claws had been sharpened for this very moment. The Council had believed the bombings would be the end of humanity's defiance. But as Earth's skies filled with fire and steel, it became clear that the opposite was true. The bombings were the beginning. They had not broken humanity. They had forged it into something unstoppable. And now, with the dragons awake, the hunt for vengeance was about to begin. The galaxy, still laughing at humanity's supposed weakness, had no idea what was coming. The survivors of the colonies knew. The leaders of Earth knew. And soon, the Council would learn in fire and blood. The bombs that had fallen on human worlds had not ended the story. They had written its opening chapter. The dragons had awoken, and the galaxy would never forget their roar. Beneath the mountains of Earth, where tunnels stretched like the veins of a sleeping giant, doors of steel older than nations began to tremble. Dust fell from the ceilings, machinery groaned, and lights that had not burned in generations flickered alive. The awakening had begun. For decades, humanity's leaders had whispered about this moment in shadows, calling it only by a single word: dragons. Few even knew what that word meant. To most, it was a myth, a story told by old veterans to frighten or inspire. But the survivors of the colony's destruction had given the order. The time for silence was gone. Humanity's secret weapons would rise. The first dragon stirred in its cradle, a colossal warship hidden under kilometers of stone. Its black hull was etched with scars from its construction, as if the ship itself bore the memory of centuries of fear. Engineers moved around it like ants, their suits reflecting the light of welding torches. Sparks showered down as dormant systems were reconnected. Massive conduits carried energy into the dragon's core, and slowly the engines began to rumble. The ground itself shook as the beast awoke, its voice a deep growl that echoed through the cavern. Soldiers watching from above felt their hearts race. For years they had trained for this day, for the chance to unleash the monsters Earth had hidden. Now that day was here. One after another, the dragons opened their eyes. In hangars buried beneath oceans, great domes of water split apart as the warships rose from the deep, water cascading off their armored hulls like rain from the wings of predators. In orbit, cloaked stations revealed their secrets, releasing dragons that had waited silently in the dark, unseen by alien sensors. Across Earth and its hidden colonies, humanity's giants emerged, no longer myths but living firepower. Each dragon was more than just a ship. It was a fortress, a predator, a nightmare given form. Their weapons glowed faintly in the dark, long-range cannons capable of tearing apart fleets in a single barrage. Their armor was layered with alloys the Council had never encountered, forged to withstand the combined fire of entire squadrons. And within their cores, reactors hummed with energy so intense that even humanity's own scientists had feared them. They had been built not to conquer, but to ensure humanity would never be erased. They were vengeance shaped into steel. As the dragons rose, soldiers and civilians alike gathered to watch. On Earth's surface, people stood in the ruins of old cities and looked to the skies where shadows passed overhead. Children pointed with wide eyes as the colossal warships blotted out the stars. Survivors from the colonies whispered among themselves, their grief mixing with awe. They had buried their dead with promises of vengeance, and now those promises had wings. The bombs that had fallen on their homes were not the end. They were the spark that brought the dragons back into the light. The council, still celebrating their so-called victory, had no idea. Alien broadcasts mocked humanity, showing images of burning towns and crying refugees. Their leaders boasted in their golden chambers, claiming the lesson had been delivered. The humans are finished, one declared, his voice proud and blind. But even as he spoke, in the deep void at the edge of council space, human fleets began to gather. And at their heart, the dragons waited. Inside one of the newly awakened dragons, the envoy who had once been humiliated in the council chamber stood on the command deck. The air thrummed with power, every console alive with green light, every officer at their station. He looked out through the vast viewing screens at the stars beyond. His jaw was tight, his eyes sharp, but his voice was calm as he spoke. They thought their bombs would break us. Instead, they have given us fire. And now we will burn their arrogance from the stars. His words carried across the ship, recorded and transmitted to every fleet, to every colony, to every survivor. It was not a speech of comfort. It was a promise. The dragon's first flight into open space was like a storm breaking. Engines roared like thunder, leaving trails of light that streaked across the heavens. Entire fleets formed around them, smaller warships aligning like wolves around their pack leaders. Humanity's military, once dismissed as small and weak, now stretched in disciplined silence, its heart glowing with vengeance. Orders came down. Prepare the first strike. Back on Earth, factories thundered without pause, pouring weapons into waiting holds. Families wept for those they had lost but cheered as reports of the dragon's awakening spread. For the first time since the bombings, hope replaced despair. It was not the hope of peace, but the hope of justice, the knowledge that humanity would not remain prey. The dragons would hunt for them. Whispers of the awakening began to spread even beyond human channels. Smugglers spoke of black warships gathering in the void. Traders claimed to have seen shadows in hyperspace, moving faster than anything they knew. Fear spread across alien worlds, unease threading into every conversation. The council dismissed these as rumors, but their people were not convinced. Too many stories matched. Too many voices spoke of dragons with fire in their hearts. And in the hidden war chambers of Earth, the envoy looked once more at the map of the galaxy. The red marks of the bombed colonies still burned on the display. Around them, new marks appeared, targets. He placed his hand on the glass, his voice steady, his eyes burning with iron will. The dragons are awake. Now let the hunt begin. The galaxy still thought humanity weak, still thought the bombings had ended the threat of Earth. But as the dragons spread their wings across the stars, the truth was about to be revealed. The Council had not broken humanity. They had unleashed something the galaxy would never forget. The roar of the dragons was coming, and it would not stop until the stars themselves trembled. The alien fleets stationed near the frontier were drunk on victory. Their admirals sat in command chairs, wings, claws, and scaled hands tapping in arrogance as reports of human weakness flooded in. They told their crews the war was already won, that the humans would crawl back into their homeworlds and never rise again. Music and laughter filled their halls as the wreckage of human colonies drifted silently behind them, still smoking in the void. None of them realized that their celebration would soon become a nightmare. It began with silence. A patrol of 10 alien cruisers moved through the dark of space, their scanners sweeping the void as they had done 1,000 times before. At first, there was nothing, just the cold stars, the emptiness of space. Then the sensors glitched. Static spread across their screens. Lights flickered. Just interference, the commander said, waving off his crew's concern. But then the stars themselves seemed to vanish, swallowed by shadows that moved where nothing should have moved. The crew stared wide-eyed as shapes emerged from the darkness. Massive, jagged warships, their hulls black as night, glowing faintly with lines of crimson. They drifted forward with silent precision, their engines a low growl that vibrated through the bones of everyone who heard it. Humanity's dragons had arrived. The alien commander barked orders. "Identify yourselves." His voice carried pride, but underneath it, a tremor of fear. He demanded surrender, certain that no fleet would dare face them openly. But the dragons gave no answer. They simply advanced, weapons powering up, their shadows stretching across the void like wings. And then, without warning, they struck. The first volley was fire incarnate. Cannons roared with light so bright it outshone the stars. Alien cruisers tried to raise their shields, but the beams tore through them as if they were made of paper. Entire ships disintegrated in seconds, breaking apart into molten fragments. The void was filled with explosions, burning wrecks spinning helplessly, crews screaming over open comms. The patrol had no chance. The dragons moved like predators, weaving through the debris, striking with merciless precision. The aliens fought back desperately, firing their plasma cannons, launching torpedoes, but their weapons seemed useless. Every shot was dodged or deflected, every attack answered with overwhelming force. One alien battleship, larger than the rest, tried to ram a dragon in desperation. It never reached its target. The dragon's cannons cut through its hull mid-charge, splitting it in two. Survivors fled in escape pods, only to find themselves drifting in the shadows of humanity's war machines, their lights blinking like fireflies before vanishing into darkness. Within minutes, the entire patrol was annihilated. But one ship, crippled, burning, powerless, was allowed to live. Its comms lit up with a single human transmission, translated into every alien language, the voice steady and cold. "You thought bombing our colonies would break us. Instead, you have awakened the dragons. And now, we hunt." The survivors trembled as the human fleet vanished into the void, leaving behind silence more terrifying than any explosion. When the crippled ship limped back to Council space, its story spread like wildfire. The crew described black warships larger than anything they had ever seen, weapons that tore fleets apart in seconds, and a silence that froze their blood. Many rulers laughed at first, dismissing the tale as exaggeration born of fear. But then came more reports. Convoys disappearing without trace. Fortress worlds going silent overnight. Alien admirals whispering of shadows in hyperspace. Fleets that struck and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. The whispers became fear, and fear spread faster than truth. On alien worlds across the galaxy, civilians began to panic. Markets grew quiet, travel slowed, and soldiers deserted their posts, unwilling to face the monsters humanity had unleashed. Parents told their children not to look at the skies, for the dragons might be there, waiting. The council called these rumors lies, propaganda spread by rebels. Yet even they began to feel the weight of dread. They remembered the envoy's warning, spoken with calm certainty, "If you strike us, we will hunt you forever." Back on Earth, the awakening of the dragons spread hope and fury alike. Factories thundered, producing weapons and supplies. Families who had lost everything to the bombings worked day and night, knowing their hands built the vengeance of a species. Soldiers trained harder, their spirits unbroken, their discipline sharpened. And above them, the dragons soared through space, leading fleets that no longer feared the council. In the command chamber of the flagship, the envoy stood with his officers. Holograms of burning enemy wrecks flickered across the table, marking humanity's first victories. His voice was calm, but every word carried iron. "The hunt has begun. They thought we would beg for mercy. Now they will beg us for their lives." His officers nodded in grim silence, their eyes burning with the same fire that lit the skies of the colonies. The aliens had celebrated their victory too soon. They had thought the bombs would break humanity. Instead, they had lit the fire that awoke the dragons. And now, the galaxy was learning the truth. Humanity was not broken. Humanity was hunting. And the dragons would not stop until the council's throne itself lay in ruins. The galaxy had thought the bombing of human colonies was the end of a dangerous but small species. Instead, it became the beginning of a storm that no one could contain. From one end of Council space to the other, stories spread of black warships moving like phantoms through the void. At first, the rulers laughed, dismissing them as wild tales told by frightened crews. But laughter turned to silence as wreckage drifted into ports, twisted alien hulls scarred with a crimson mark, the symbol of Earth's vengeance. Every burned convoy, every shattered patrol carried the same message. The dragons had awakened, and the hunt had begun. In the grand chamber of the council, chaos replaced arrogance. Alien rulers shouted over one another, their proud voices sharp with fear. Some demanded a full-scale assault on Earth before the humans could spread further. Others warned that every strike only fed their fury, that humanity was no ordinary prey. They fight like predators, one admitted reluctantly. They strike, vanish, and strike again. This is not war, it is a hunt. His words were drowned in a storm of arguments, but deep down, they all felt the same dread. They had unleashed something they did not understand, and now it was too late to put it back to sleep. Reports poured in faster than the council could deny them. Entire supply lines vanished in the void. Fortress worlds, once thought untouchable, went dark overnight. Survivors who managed to flee spoke of dragons appearing from nowhere, their cannons tearing through fleets with merciless precision, their shadows spreading fear before a single shot was fired. The council tried to rally their empires with promises of victory, but their people were not convinced. On the streets of alien cities, whispers grew louder. The humans had returned not as prey, but as hunters. On Earth, there was no celebration, only resolve. Factories roared day and night, forging weapons and ships as fast as hands could build them. Families who had lost everything in the bombings worked without pause. Their grief turned into steel and fire. In training halls, soldiers drilled until their bodies broke, then rose to drill again, their eyes burning with vengeance. They carried no illusions of glory. They fought for survival, for justice, for the memory of those buried beneath alien fire. The dragons led them, black titans gliding through the void, each one a symbol of the fury Earth had hidden for generations. The first counterstrike came against a council fortress world known for its arrogance. Its defenses stretched across orbit, cannons mounted on platforms that glowed like stars. Its governors had boasted that no fleet could breach their shields, that they were the wall that held humanity back. When the dragons arrived, the wall crumbled in less than an hour. The humans struck with precision, tearing down shield generators, crippling defense platforms, and shattering fleets that had stood for centuries. Alien commanders begged for reinforcements, but by the time help arrived, the planet was silent. Human banners flew above the smoldering fortress, their crimson mark burned into the skies. The galaxy reeled in shock. No one had believed humans could destroy a fortress world. Now they realized the truth. Nothing was beyond their reach. Species long oppressed under the council began to whisper more openly, some daring to rise in rebellion, emboldened by humanity's fury. They saw in the dragons not just vengeance, but possibility, the chance that the council could finally fall. For the first time in centuries, the grip of galactic rulers trembled. In the command deck of his flagship, the envoy stood among his generals, studying the map of stars. Red marks spread further each day, symbols of council losses, of colonies liberated or destroyed, of fleets hunted into silence. His face was calm, but his voice was iron. They believed bombs would break us. Instead, they forged us. The dragons will not stop, not until their throne lies in ruins. His officers bowed their heads in agreement, their eyes hardened with the same fire. The council's leaders clung to their pride, but in their hearts they felt the shadow drawing closer. Their fleets, once mighty, now hesitated to patrol. Their convoys moved only under heavy guard, and still they vanished. Their fortress worlds shook at every shadow in the void, fearing the next strike. The laughter that had mocked Earth was gone, replaced by the silence of prey that knows the predator is near. And across the stars, humanity advanced. Colony by colony, fleet by fleet, the dragons cut their path. The galaxy had thought bombing human colonies would end the story. But it had only written the prologue. The true story was vengeance, and its chapters were carved in fire. The dragons had awoken, and they would not rest until the council itself was nothing but ash drifting in the void. The council's pride could not hide their fear any longer. In every corner of their empire, the whispers of humanity's dragons grew louder. Merchants refused to travel, soldiers deserted their posts, and ordinary civilians looked to the skies with dread, half expecting black warships to appear at any moment. The rulers tried to cover the truth with lies, broadcasting victories that never happened, claiming the humans were nothing but rebels making noise. But the silence of their fleets, the ruins of their fortresses, and the smoke of their colonies betrayed them. The galaxy was beginning to believe that the council was no longer the hunter. The hunter was humanity. Desperation drove the council to act. They summoned their greatest fleets, pulling ships from every corner of their empire. Entire sectors were left undefended as they gathered their strength into a single armada, a wall of fire meant to crush humanity once and for all. Tens of thousands of alien warships assembled near a system on the edge of their territory, the skies thick with their engines, their weapons glowing in readiness. Alien commanders gave speeches of glory and duty, trying to cover the tremor in their voices. They promised their crews that this battle would end the threat forever. But deep inside, they feared the truth. They were not going to face rebels or raiders. They were going to face dragons. The humans knew of the gathering long before it was complete. Hidden scouts watched the fleets assemble, transmitting every detail back to Earth. The envoy and his generals studied the reports with calm precision. They did not speak of retreat or surrender. They spoke of strategy, of traps, of how to bleed the enemy dry before the first shot was even fired. Humanity did not plan to meet the armada head-on. They planned to unmake it piece by piece, like predators circling prey too blind to see the teeth closing in. The trap began in silence. Mines drifted unseen in the void, waiting like predators in the dark. Decoy transmissions lured enemy squadrons away from their formations, leaving gaps in the wall. Drones spread out, jamming communications, filling alien screens with false images. When the armada finally advanced, it marched not into battle but into a cage of shadows. The first strikes came without warning. Explosions tore through the rear lines of the alien fleet as mines detonated, ripping cruisers apart before their shields could even rise. Drones swarmed the flanks, unleashing fire that blinded entire squadrons. Panic spread as alien commanders screamed conflicting orders, trying to hold their wall together. Then, from the darkness, the dragons arrived. They emerged like titans from a nightmare, colossal warships with hulls blacker than the void, their engines glowing with crimson fire. Their cannons roared in unison, beams of light cutting through alien ships as if they were nothing but fragile glass. Entire formations vanished in seconds, their wreckage drifting silently into the storm. The aliens tried to regroup, but every time they gathered, the dragons struck from another angle, tearing their lines apart with relentless precision. The armada, meant to be a symbol of unity and power, became a storm of confusion and death. Alien crews fought with desperation, their voices shaking over comms as they fired blindly into the dark. Some tried to ram the dragons, but their attempts ended in fire, their ships split apart before they could reach their targets. Others fled, only to find themselves hunted down by smaller human warships moving in perfect coordination with their titans. Every escape route was cut off, every plan turned into another slaughter. The humans were not just fighting a battle. They were proving a truth the galaxy could no longer deny. Humanity did not fight for survival. Humanity hunted. The battle raged for hours, but the outcome had been decided the moment it began. When the fires dimmed and the smoke cleared, the armada that had once filled the skies was nothing but drifting wreckage. Tens of thousands of alien ships, gone. Their crews lost to silence. Only a handful managed to escape, limping back with broken hulls and shattered spirits. They carried with them the same message the survivors of the first patrol had carried. The dragons are real, and they cannot be stopped. On Earth, the news of the victory spread like wildfire. Families wept, not only for the vengeance delivered but for the hope it brought. Children pointed to the skies, imagining the dragons soaring among the stars. Factories thundered louder, soldiers trained harder, and civilians who had once feared extinction now believed in triumph. Humanity's spirit, thought broken by bombs, now blazed stronger than ever. In the council chamber, silence reigned. The rulers who had once mocked Earth sat pale and trembling. Their greatest armada had been destroyed, their pride shattered. Some spoke of surrender, whispering that perhaps peace could be bargained before it was too late. Others, still clinging to arrogance, demanded new fleets be built, new strategies devised. But beneath their words, fear gripped them all. They knew what was coming. Humanity would not stop here. The dragons would keep hunting, and the throne itself was now within their reach. On the flagship of the human fleet, the envoy stood at the viewing deck, his eyes fixed on the stars beyond. His voice was calm, steady, and final as he spoke to his captains. They thought their bombs would silence us. Instead, they woke the dragons. And now, there is no silence. There is only the hunt. And we will not stop until their throne burns. The stars glittered coldly around him, but in that moment, every human heart burned hotter than fire. The council had tried to crush humanity with bombs. Instead, they had unleashed predators the galaxy could never chain again. The hunt was far from over. It had only just begun. The ruins of the council's grand fleets still drifted in the void when the next wave of fear began to spread. Across alien space, news of the Great Armada's destruction tore through markets, taverns, barracks, and throne rooms. Entire empires that had once hidden behind the council's strength now trembled, for they realized that the shield they trusted had been shattered in a single night. Their rulers spoke in trembling voices, claiming the humans had fought dishonorably with tricks and shadows, but their words rang hollow. Everyone had seen the wreckage. Everyone whispered the same truth. The dragons are real, and they cannot be stopped. On alien colonies, unrest grew into riots. Civilians who had once bowed to council soldiers now spat at their feet, mocking them as useless protectors. Traders refused to launch their ships, fearful of human hunters lurking beyond every jump point. Armies once loyal to the council muttered in secret, wondering why they should die for rulers who could not even defend themselves. The fear was not only of humanity's weapons, but of humanity's will. For every alien knew the humans should have been broken. Bombed colonies, cities in ruins, entire families lost. Yet instead of falling silent, humanity had risen with fire and vengeance. The council's golden chamber, once filled with arrogance and laughter, now reeked of desperation. The rulers gathered in stormy debate, their voices sharp with panic. "We must crush them before they reach the heart of the galaxy," one shouted, his claws striking the table. Another hissed in fear, "You have seen what happens when we send fleets. Every battle feeds their legend. Every loss spreads their shadow. If we fight them again, we will fall faster." Others demanded peace, whispering that perhaps Earth could be bribed or appeased. But none dared speak aloud the truth that weighed on all of them. The humans had promised they would hunt forever, and so far, that promise had been unbroken. While the council argued, humanity moved with purpose. The dragons led fleets deeper into alien space, not with recklessness but with precise strikes. They did not waste their strength on small targets. They burned supply depots, crippled fuel stations, destroyed command hubs. With every move, the council grew weaker, its power bleeding out through wounds humanity knew exactly where to cut. Alien soldiers who survived these encounters returned broken, whispering in terror of warships that struck like predators, of soldiers in black armor who advanced without fear, their rifles cutting through resistance like scythes through grass. The envoy stood at the heart of it all, aboard the flagship of the dragons. His eyes were calm, his voice iron as he spoke to his generals. They thought bombing our colonies would end us. Instead, they ended themselves. Their throne trembles. And soon, we will take it. His words spread not only through his fleets but back to Earth, carried into the factories where civilians worked night and day, into the training camps where recruits drilled until their hands bled, into the homes of survivors who wept not with despair but with grim pride. Humanity was no longer prey. Humanity was vengeance given form. The council finally gathered what remained of its courage. On their throne world, they transformed the capital into a fortress. Orbital cannons bristled in the skies, fleets clustered in desperate defense, and armies filled the streets below. They believed that if they could hold this single world, tearing their lines apart with relentless precision, the Armada, meant to be a symbol of unity and power, became a storm of confusion and death. Alien crews fought with desperation, their voices shaking over comms as they fired blindly into the dark. Some tried to ram the dragons, but their attempts ended in fire. Their ships split apart before they could reach their targets. Others fled, only to find themselves hunted down by smaller human warships moving in perfect coordination with their titans. Every escape route was cut off, every plan turned into another slaughter. The humans were not just fighting a battle. They were proving a truth the galaxy could no longer deny. Humanity did not fight for survival. Humanity hunted. The battle raged for hours, but the outcome had been decided the moment it began. When the fires dimmed and the smoke cleared, the armada that had once filled the skies was nothing but drifting wreckage. Tens of thousands of alien ships, gone. Their crews lost to silence. Only a handful managed to escape, limping back with broken hulls and shattered spirits. They carried with them the same message the survivors of the first patrol had carried. The dragons are real, and they cannot be stopped. On Earth, the news of the victory spread like wildfire. Families wept, not only for the vengeance delivered but for the hope it brought. Children pointed to the skies, imagining the dragons soaring among the stars. Factories thundered louder, soldiers trained harder, and civilians who had once feared extinction now believed in triumph. Humanity's spirit, thought broken by bombs, now blazed stronger than ever. In the council chamber, silence reigned. The rulers who had once mocked Earth sat pale and trembling. Their greatest armada had been destroyed, their pride shattered. Some spoke of surrender, whispering that perhaps peace could be bargained before it was too late. Others, still clinging to arrogance, demanded new fleets be built, new strategies devised. But beneath their words, fear gripped them all. They knew what was coming. Humanity would not stop here. The dragons would keep hunting, and the throne itself was now within their reach. On the flagship of the human fleet, the envoy stood at the viewing deck, his eyes fixed on the stars beyond. His voice was calm, steady, and final as he spoke to his captains. They thought their bombs would silence us. Instead, they woke the dragons. And now, there is no silence. There is only the hunt. And we will not stop until their throne burns. The stars glittered coldly around him, but in that moment, every human heart burned hotter than fire. The council had tried to crush humanity with bombs. Instead, they had unleashed predators the galaxy could never chain again. The hunt was far from over. It had only just begun. The ruins of the council's grand fleets still drifted in the void when the next wave of fear began to spread. Across alien space, news of the Great Armada's destruction tore through markets, taverns, barracks, and throne rooms. Entire empires that had once hidden behind the council's strength now trembled, for they realized that the shield they trusted had been shattered in a single night. Their rulers spoke in trembling voices, claiming the humans had fought dishonorably with tricks and shadows, but their words rang hollow. Everyone had seen the wreckage. Everyone whispered the same truth. The dragons are real, and they cannot be stopped. On alien colonies, unrest grew into riots. Civilians who had once bowed to council soldiers now spat at their feet, mocking them as useless protectors. Traders refused to launch their ships, fearful of human hunters lurking beyond every jump point. Armies once loyal to the council muttered in secret, wondering why they should die for rulers who could not even defend themselves. The fear was not only of humanity's weapons, but of humanity's will. For every alien knew the humans should have been broken. Bombed colonies, cities in ruins, entire families lost. Yet instead of falling silent, humanity had risen with fire and vengeance. The council's golden chamber, once filled with arrogance and laughter, now reeked of desperation. The rulers gathered in stormy debate, their voices sharp with panic. "We must crush them before they reach the heart of the galaxy," one shouted, his claws striking the table. Another hissed in fear. You have seen what happens when we send fleets. Every battle feeds their legend. Every loss spreads their shadow. If we fight them again, we will fall faster. Others demanded peace, whispering that perhaps Earth could be bribed or appeased. But none dared speak aloud the truth that weighed on all of them. The humans had promised they would hunt forever, and so far, that promise had been unbroken. While the council argued, humanity moved with purpose. The dragons led fleets deeper into alien space, not with recklessness but with precise strikes. They did not waste their strength on small targets. They burned supply depots, crippled fuel stations, destroyed command hubs. With every move, the council grew weaker, its power bleeding out through wounds humanity knew exactly where to cut. Alien soldiers who survived these encounters returned broken, whispering in terror of warships that struck like predators, of soldiers in black armor who advanced without fear, their rifles cutting through resistance like scythes through grass. The envoy stood at the heart of it all, aboard the flagship of the dragons. His eyes were calm, his voice iron as he spoke to his generals. They thought bombing our colonies would end us. Instead, they ended themselves. Their throne trembles. And soon, we will take it. His words spread not only through his fleets but back to Earth, carried into the factories where civilians worked night and day, into the training camps where recruits drilled until their hands bled, into the homes of survivors who wept not with despair but with grim pride. Humanity was no longer prey. Humanity was vengeance given form. The council finally gathered what remained of its courage. On their throne world, they transformed the capital into a fortress. Orbital cannons bristled in the skies, fleets clustered in desperate defense, and armies filled the streets below. They believed that if they could hold this single world, if they could protect the throne, they could survive. But their defenses were not strength. They were fear given shape. Their people looked to the skies, dreading the shadows they knew would one day arrive. And then, the shadows came. Humanity's fleets cut through the void, the dragons leading them, their massive hulls glowing with crimson fire. They emerged without warning, their silence more terrifying than the roar of enemy cannons. Alien defenses lit up the skies, filling space with fire, but the dragons pressed forward, their weapons tearing through orbital cannons, their fleets breaking enemy formations as if they were nothing. Dropships plunged into the atmosphere, carrying human soldiers who stormed the capital's streets, their black armor gleaming in the glow of burning banners. Alien soldiers fired desperately, but their lines shattered before the relentless advance of predators who had promised never to stop. The council's golden chamber shook with the thunder of battle. Explosions echoed through the capital, rattling the marble pillars that had once stood for eternity. The rulers huddled together, their voices gone, their arrogance silenced. They had laughed at humanity once. Now they waited in silence as the sound of boots grew closer, as the march of human soldiers filled the hallways of their fortress world. The laughter that had mocked Earth had become chains around their necks. At last, the doors of the chamber burst open. Black-armored soldiers stepped inside, their rifles steady, their eyes cold. Behind them walked the envoy, the same man who had once stood here, humiliated, ignored, dismissed. His steps echoed in the silence, louder than the council's laughter had ever been. He walked to the base of the throne, his gaze sweeping over the rulers who cowered before him. He did not shout. He did not need to. His voice was calm, steady, final. You thought bombing our colonies would break us, he said. But fire does not break humanity. It forges us. And your arrogance has given us dragons. The rulers said nothing. Their silence was their surrender. And as the envoy raised his hand, humanity's banner unfurled above the chamber. The crimson mark of Earth spread across the golden walls, casting them in new light. The council had fallen. The throne was no longer theirs. The galaxy watched in shock. On distant worlds, species whispered in awe, in fear, in hope. The humans had not only avenged their colonies. They had claimed the seat of power itself. And in that moment, everyone understood. The dragons were awake, and the hunt was not over. It would never be over, not until the galaxy learned what Earth had always known. Humanity does not break. Humanity hunts. the council's throne world burned. Its skies, once filled with parades and banners of power, now glowed red with the fire of wreckage drifting in orbit. Alien fleets that had once been symbols of dominance floated in silence, their shattered hulks a warning to anyone still foolish enough to resist. The capital's streets, paved in marble and gold, were choked with smoke, and the proud towers of the council stood scarred and broken. Where arrogance had ruled for centuries, fear now reigned. And in the heart of it all, the chamber of the throne, the symbol of galactic power itself, was no longer theirs. Human boots echoed through its halls. Soldiers in black armor stood in disciplined silence, their rifles ready but their posture calm. They did not come as raiders or conquerors. They came as executioners of a promise. At the far end of the chamber, the envoy who had once been mocked stood tall, his eyes cold but steady. Behind him, the crimson banner of Earth unfurled, draping itself over the gilded walls, blotting out the old emblems of alien empires. The rulers of the council sat in silence, their heads lowered, their voices gone. They had laughed once when he spoke of vengeance, laughed when he warned them that humanity would hunt without end. Now the laughter was a ghost, buried under the weight of their own defeat. The envoy ascended the steps of the throne slowly, each step louder than the chaos of battle outside. When he reached the seat, he did not sit at first. He turned to face the rulers, his voice carrying across the hall. You thought bombing our colonies would break us. You thought fire would silence us. But humanity was forged in fire long before your empires existed. We warned you, and you laughed. Now you sit in the ruins of your arrogance, hunted by the very prey you mocked. His words were not shouted, yet they struck with the force of steel. The rulers flinched, some looking away, others trembling openly. At last, the envoy sat upon the throne. The sight sent shockwaves across the galaxy as broadcasts carried the image to every world. The seat that had denied humanity a place, the seat that had laughed at their warnings, now belonged to them. On alien colonies, civilians gathered around screens in silence, watching as the envoy's eyes burned with cold resolve. On oppressed worlds, cheers erupted in the streets as chains were broken and banners of rebellion rose. And on Earth, families wept with pride, their grief for the fallen mixing with triumph. The dragons had not only avenged the dead, they had given humanity the crown of the stars. But the envoy did not speak of peace. His voice, calm and unwavering, declared a different truth. This is not the end of our hunt. The dragons do not sleep again. For every world that dares strike us, for every empire that dares chain us, remember this day. You unleashed the dragons, and they will never rest. Humanity will never rest. His words rolled through the chamber, through the broadcast, through the galaxy itself. They were not a speech of conquest, but of warning. A warning carved in fire. Outside the chamber, the war continued for hours, but resistance crumbled quickly. Council soldiers surrendered in droves, laying down their weapons, unwilling to face the relentless human advance. Civilians cowered, expecting slaughter, but the humans spared them, passing through with discipline. They wanted no massacre, no mindless revenge. What they wanted was the throne, and they had taken it. The message was clear. This was not chaos. This was control. Humanity was not a scourge. Humanity was now the law. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy shifted. Some species bent their knees to humanity willingly, begging for protection under their shadow. Others fled, retreating into the far corners of space, hoping to hide from the dragon's gaze. But all remembered the same truth. The Council had bombed human colonies, and in doing so, had unleashed a power no one could contain. Humanity's vengeance was not a spark, it was a firestorm. And the dragons, once whispered as myth, were now the guardians and predators of a new order. The envoy sat in the throne room often, not as a king, but as a reminder. He looked upon the banners of Earth hanging where alien symbols had once flown, and he thought of the colonies lost, the families buried under ash, the children who had cried in the night as bombs fell. He did not smile. Humanity's victory was not joy. It was justice. And justice was never gentle. His generals came to him with reports of rebuilding, of new fleets rising, of worlds now pledging loyalty. He listened, but his mind was fixed on a single truth. The hunt was not over. It would never be over, because the galaxy would never forget what it had done to humanity. And humanity would never forgive. On Earth, children grew up beneath skies shadowed by the dragons, learning their names, their shapes, their roars. They grew up not with fear, but with pride. Their parents told them of the day the Council bombed their colonies, and the day humanity took the throne in return. They told them that fire had not destroyed them, it had awakened them. And so the next generation was raised not to fear the stars, but to claim them. The galaxy looked on with awe, with fear, with respect. Humanity had been prey once. No longer. The dragons had risen, and with them rose a truth carved into every world. When you strike at Earth, you do not break it. You only awaken the storm. You only unleash the dragons.